Welcome to the Roniel and DaRon podcast show. I'm DaRon.
And I'm Roniel. And before we get started, I definitely got to ask you again, have you seen any new movies that came out last week or this week in particular, because the new Shang Chi is coming out? So are you even thinking about going to see that?
I haven't. I've actually been, we've been fixated on some of the Netflix stuff at the moment. So watching some of the new Netflix originals and things of that nature. How about yourself?
I'm going to see Shang-Chi. I got to say it right. I said Shang-Chi, and I don't want to disrespect you by the Shang-Chi. Okay? I'm going to see that. I'm very excited about it. I didn't see anything last week. I really just been binge watching Big Bang Theory. I love Sheldon. He's just hilarious. I have that Sheldon effect myself. So, but yeah, I'm going to see Shang-Chi this Friday, so can't wait to see it. I heard it's going to be pretty good, so we shall see.
Well,
with that being, go ahead.
In the spirit of not offending someone, I'll just let you know, with almost all foreign languages, they go in pairs of two. So, sasi su se so, dadi du de do is Japanese alphabet. Kaki kukeko mami mu memo nani nu ne no papi pupepo. So it'd be.
But the way that it's spelled like Shang, so people think.
Okay, that would be Sha.
Sha.
Sha is, so you do have Su, you have Shu, you have Sha, Shi, Shu, She, Sho, Gagi, Guge, Go.
Anyway, we don't say it right, but
no.
Somebody corrected and said it was Shang-Chi, not Shang-Chi. So that makes me wonder if people have been getting it wrong for Mortal Kombat.
As in Shang Tsung?
Yeah.
So, okay. So now that Shi, Sha, Shang Tsung.
Yeah.
But
that's go ahead.
I was going to say it's a tonal language, so
I've been saying things wrong for a minute. So when I was seeing that interviewer, saying that they were corrected and somebody from China said it was Shang Chi, Chi, I was like, oh, but it looks like Shang Chi.
Okay, so the part of the problem is a lot of people have difficulty hearing. When you don't grow up with different languages, you can't hear all the sounds that they're making. When my son, for example, was first learning Chinese, he and I were both listening to it, and he would try to repeat what they were saying, and I'm listening, and I'm like, that's not what they said. And I would have to correct him because we can't hear it. And that's actually one of the big reasons why people wind up having accents, is because they can't hear the sounds that they didn't grow up with and the sounds that they didn't make growing up. But anyway, how it's pronounced also depends mildly on which dialect and where he's supposedly from. It all gets complicated, but groups of two. But if you have the SH that's together, TS that's together, but it's like shortened, so it's still within the same space. And same with the CH and things of that nature, but groups of two otherwise. And that actually applies to French, Italian, Spanish. German's pretty straightforward. German's easy. But most languages, English is one of the few languages where we consistently chunk it in three. And that's more American English than, say, British English. The British are more likely to chunk in twos, which is partially why American English and British English comes out so different.
I always learned something, man, because I've been like butchering that for a minute now. I'm sure people have been saying that for a minute, and it's like, no, that's not right. So that was very interesting to notice that's not the right pronunciation. With that being said, so thanks for the correction, because I'm like, all right, I don't see it, but I get it if that's the way it's being said, and that's their culture.
I'll tell you what. Okay, so I want to be really honest here because this is ridiculously important. A lot of people like, so if I sit there and were to pronounce things correctly, foreign words correctly in this podcast, most people who speak English would have no clue what I'm saying or trying to say. And that's why you'll hear me oftentimes. So I'll say Okinawa, right? I'll say Samar. It's so hard to say it wrong. It's hard to say it in English the way that the English do because it's so wrong. Samurai. I'll say samurai. You know, because if I say samurai, then a lot of Americans are like, what is he talking about? A lot of English speakers have no clue what I would be talking about. So I will say there's a lot of merit behind mispronouncing something solely so that everyone around you knows what you're talking about, because that's the point of language. The point of language is to convey something. And I mean, you don't speak Taiwanese, Japanese, Chinese, Hangul, you know, you don't speak some other language. You speak it from the English perspective. Now, what I won't do is say jalapenos. I know some people say that in the United States. I have to say jalapeno. And even then, I'll usually do it more the American way, where it is still that H sound for the J, which is proper, and say jalapeno. God, it's so hard to say these things wrong. Jalapeno. I have no problem saying that, or saying, you know, tostada or taquito, but I won't, because otherwise you have no clue what I'm talking about.
Man, look, I would not have a clue what you were talking about. And shoot, sometimes I don't even have a clue what I'm talking about. So, hey, you know, and to be honest, a lot of people don't understand that, like, you know, I guess I don't know what dialect we speak, but I know that my English is pretty much broken. So, and then coming from the culture I come from, you know, it's hard to, sometimes it's hard for me to get out of the slang.
Yep, right.
Language, you know, so and I speak that in a certain way, but I also have to speak with a list, so it's hard for me to talk. And a lot of people don't understand that. So, you know, I get this thing when I'm talking to people, they're like, you sound like you are from, you know, you got a different accent. Like some people tell me I don't even sound like I'm from Cleveland. I don't even think Cleveland has an accent. Like, if you really want to be honest, they say we do, but I can't see it.
Ohio has an accent. And Ohio's accent is pretty clear to me.
What is the accent?
It's Midwestern, but it's not as clean as the Midwestern. The Midwestern accent is actually the most neutral English accent in existence. It does not get more neutral than the Midwestern accent. But then you start moving outside of that and you get really wonky speech patterns. And a perfect example, of course, of Ohio's linguistics is they say good instead of well. I'm doing good. No, the word is I'm doing well. He's doing a good job, but I'm doing well.
You know, I noticed that. You know, I feel like that's the term, and it's not really the term. You're right. But
I get bothered when it's my children's English teacher and they're using Ohio grammar, shall we say. That really bothers. That irks me. Absolutely irks me. But other than that, because I would expect the English teachers to use proper English, but whatever.
I mean, sometimes do they even know what proper English is?
Okay, that's a good question. My daughter actually had an English assignment. She got a 9 out of 12 on. He wanted them to write a story and wanted it to be very descriptive and all of this other stuff. And she spent 2 weeks on it because that was the maximum amount of time. And she went over it over and over and over and over again. It was only allowed to be 9 sentences long. And she got a 9 out of 12 for a lot of reasons that she disagreed with. But he was saying stuff. And I was sitting there going, I had read his because my daughter had wanted me to read it beforehand. And I thought a child wrote it. Not to be rude, I thought it, being honest here, I thought a child had written it because I was sitting there going, it sounds like someone's using a lot of words that sound big that they don't know how to use. That's very common, very common. And when she said it was the English teacher, I was like, oh my goodness, this is not good. This is not good. I openly admit I have a decent vocabulary, and there are a lot of reasons for it, to include my mother was an English teacher. So, you know, and having lived overseas, you get English from that different perspective. I listen to a lot of like BBC and things of that nature. And the British, if you ever listen, have a much higher vocabulary, and they use a lot more words than Americans in general do. So you get that exposure to a lot more words and a higher vocabulary. And it winds up being very beneficial for you. But then the problem is when you hear people use words and they don't understand them, it just bothers you, especially when they're adults. With kids, I'm like, okay, what's a kid? They don't know. But when it's your child's English teacher, and your child's English teacher is brutalizing the English language, but I'm not going to argue. You can never argue with the teacher. There's no point.
Yeah, nah. That's why I say, like, you know, there were some things that I always felt that was wrong, especially in college. And I'd be like, even if you know it's wrong, there's no arguing or debating.
Right.
They'll like, no, this is right.
Right.
Like, no, that's technically wrong, especially when it was security classes. I'd be like, that is wrong.
Right.
And they'll be like, no, this is right. This is what the book. I said, no, well, the book must be wrong too, because that's wrong. That's not how this is supposed to be implemented. So I don't debate that. I just let it be. And, you know, I let somebody else be the jerk. I'm not going to be the jerk.
I agree. I saw a lot of that in school. I mean, I see a lot of that today. A lot of the material you see printed, and that's books online and elsewhere, is wrong. And unfortunately, teachers use that. The textbooks that they tend to use are horrible. Like, my children have gotten into arguments with their teachers with their science teachers about viruses. And they got marked off for saying that a virus was. So the question was, viruses are alive, true or false? And my child in this case said false, because, you know, that it's not true. Viruses are in a fugue state. They sit in between, and it would be fallacious to say that they are alive, but it would also be fallacious to say that they are not alive. And
so yeah, they're in between.
Right. And science is still trying to debate it. And part of the problem is the definition of living is broad, but not broad enough. And the question then becomes, based on the definition, the reason why viruses don't count is because they can't self-propagate. Well, I mean, technically neither can parasites. So yeah, honestly, this goes back to the whole define a continent. There was no definition for the word continent scientifically until about 10 years ago. And planets sat in a similar state. What made a planet wasn't defined. That's why Pluto got kicked back and all of this stuff. But anyway, and my kids have gotten in arguments over whether or not the US was a democracy. My kids are like, no, it's a democratic republic. It's not the same thing.
Right. With that being said, I have to go back to something and then we can get to the main topic of this, you know, episode. But I used to have this debate on scientists versus engineers and science, period.
Right.
So my biggest problem with science, and I love science, by the way, science and engineering. My biggest problem with science is a lot of it is hypothetical. And, you know, I'm not saying they don't do a lot of different, you know, tests and different things that, you know, numbers don't lie, but you're talking about, and when I learned in school, it's like educated guessing, you know.
Right.
And, you know, you doing your trials and, you know, your tests and all that. And that's great. Your research. And, you know, I'm not saying that it's not great, but when you kind of have this debate between science and engineering, where engineering is actually proving things, some science or theoretical sciences doesn't mean that it proves anything. Now you have to go all the way to proving it. But a lot of things when I was in school, I was just like, yeah, but this doesn't prove anything. We would go through all these different tests and we make our educated guess, but what if my educated guess is wrong? Even though I'm seeing or have this data in front of me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the branches of science where you can just sit there and postulate all day long and you don't actually have to prove it in any way, shape, or form, and where they don't adhere to what I would call the proper rigors of the scientific protocol. And I'm not going to name names or start naming fields. I think anyone who is a scientist knows exactly, in fact, everyone who is a scientist should know exactly what fields I'm talking about. And then it becomes really ugly when you have groups like social sciences, which are not science at all. There's nothing scientific about the social sciences, but they run around claiming they are a science now. I understand exactly what you're saying. To me, we're diluting the term in a lot of ways, and it's harmful to the sciences, especially when you start having complex discussions. So I'll give you a good example. This is what I have always been told and always heard and always seen myself, having been an actual factual scientist for the DoD and for NASA and for a few other agencies and organizations. Science tells you what has been. Science does not predict. And that's part of the problem. So then when we talk, and climatology, for example, is the perfect example of this. So climatology is the study, and it is a science, the study of climate history over time. And so they're often looking way back, way back. And then you'll have people take their data and use it to create climatological models and things of that nature, and then make claims that they really have no basis for. And this is going exactly what you were talking about. And that's part of the reason why we keep revising things, and there are a lot of problems. And this is something, so when I went to Colorado State University, there was a brilliant man, Dr. Gray. Dr. Gray he's deceased now, he was the foremost climatologist in the world. He sat there and would do the hurricane predictions, national hurricane predictions, and his were always the closest. He beat out NOAA. He beat out everyone, every single year, decade after decade after decade. And he had it was actually a very simple way of doing it, but the long story short, he sat there and railed against what he saw was the abuse of climatology and science to create these predictive models that were grossly inaccurate. And these models saying things about climate change, for example, to him, and I'm not entering this debate in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying this is what he said. He said that the climate crisis, so to speak, was not in fact man-made, that it was, and he had very good records because this was his job, this was his study, his area of study for many decades. He said that this was just a natural cycle of things, and this is how things went. And as a result, he was railing against people sitting there and saying that certain greenhouse gases were responsible, or largely responsible, solely responsible. And his thing was, we don't have enough knowledge to start making that claim. We can't make these baseless claims. Since he originally started attacking that, he himself was attacked and largely blackballed to the point of really no return, excluding that everyone continued to look toward him for his hurricane models, because he always got the numbers right, and he always got where they would be, where they'd form, and all that good stuff right. And it's ironic to me that they would use him for that, but they wouldn't use him for the other stuff, considering the only reason why he was able to be so accurate was because his frame of reference in general was proper. Meaning everyone else was so wrong because they were making gross assumptions about the impact of things they didn't understand rather than looking at history. I'm not saying that various greenhouse gases don't have an effect. I'm not weighing in on this subject at all. I'm just saying what he said and what he vehemently said, and pointing out that there is some legitimacy for his claims. And this is exactly what you were talking about. But we have adjusted over and over again. Oh, well, CO2 doesn't make the impact we thought it does. It's significantly less. Methane doesn't make the impact we thought it does. It's significantly less. And when people go after like cattle farms and things of that nature, and they say, oh, well, those are responsible. And I'm going, yeah, but historically, there were more cattle than there are today actually on the planet. And bison were by the million. Now, bison don't have the same problem here in the United States as the imported cattle do. But the reason why cattle in the United States get so gassy is because they're feed. If you feed them the wrong stuff, they get gassy. If you're feeding them things like corn, they get real gassy. Let them go forage and you don't have that problem. Or you could just eat bison, which is better for you and better for the United States' environment because they belong here. Anyway, sorry. That was a whole nother topic. All right.
No, I'm sorry. I kind of felt that we were on that topic. It's disgusting that it was something that irked me a lot because I had the issue of trying to figure out whether I wanted to be an engineer or scientist. Now, I'm not even going to get into a debate about computer science as a whole because, I kept trying to figure out, do I want to go to computer science route or do I want to be a computer engineer? So, and then it was this debate about computer science as being a science and then, computer engineering being an actual engineering and more towards the science and a computer scientist. So that's a crazy debate. But, technically we are scientists from our degree, but does that really mean that we are really a science? But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day.
I'm an actual scientist, but that's a different matter. Computer science aside, I did actual scientific research. But yes, you're right, actually. That is a common debate, and a lot of people you'll get scientists who get a little perturbed when you say computer science is a science. To them, I don't know. They get. I think they're a little full of hot air in some ways. There are clear delineations, but for the most part, the term itself is real fuzzy. And I mean, I give credit to that. The term is fuzzy, but social science does not fit in that fuzz.
Yeah. Like the way I can see computer science being a science is to taking the same method and the way you solve a problem. The way they solve problems, and they're solving a problem using a tool. Just like scientists solve problems using tools nowadays, but it's just the way you solve the problem. I can see it being somewhat of a science, but then again, I kind of wonder if computer science should be more of an engineering thing than a science thing.
I think part of the issue is computer science was and can be very sciencey, and it can also be very engineering. And it really depends on your job within the field. It's a very large field. Really, the delineation between electrical engineer, computer scientist, computer engineer, and things of that nature is also very murky. It's very, very fuzzy. And there's a lot of overlap. There's a ton of overlap between them, to the point where many people who are electrical engineers can also get a double major in computer science without taking extra classes. And people in computer science, depending on the college, can do the same thing as well. And the same thing is true within CIS and computer engineering. Now, CIS is more business oriented, so they're a very high level. But real computer science, old school computer science, was about the research that we now see with your chips, with your processors, motherboards, with parallel computing and things of that nature. And they actually applied scientific rigor to it. You don't see as much of that in the general field the way you used to, because the general field has hyper-focused on system administration, application programming, and things of that nature, which are a very tiny subset of the greater whole. And I think it is erroneous to label a programmer a scientist in most cases, not all cases, because if you've worked on a scientific research team, you'll find that they do a lot of programming, because that's how we build models and things of that nature. So, I mean, there is that, but that doesn't make programming science. That just means programming is a tool used by scientists. Just because you use a mass spectrometer doesn't make you a scientist. It just means you're someone using the tool. I mean, calipers.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I just know I got a computer science degree. I'm a scientist by heart because I love science. I wanted to be a physicist, but like I said, there was just not a lot of money in it. I love physics, and there's some things I would love to work on, but not a lot of money in it. So
yeah, you have to be one of the lucky people to make any real money. So
yeah, so I'm just not going to say I'm not one of those lucky people. So we're going to just say that I'm glad to be a hacker, and that's what I do, or whatever you want to call me, a consultant, whatever. I'd be glad to be able to do that. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for calling me that. I am the noob of the noobs of the noobs of the noobs.
The noobiest noob, whoever noobed the newbie earth.
Yeah, I love that. The noobiest noob to whoever knew. Not whoever lived, but whoever knew.
That's right.
Hey, yeah. So don't get it mistaken. He's Uber and I'm Nuber. There you go. But yeah, so we can say that for another debate, but let's get to the topic at hand today.
I didn't realize that was a debate, but okay.
I'm not talking about the debate of who's a noob and who's an Uber. I'm talking about the debate about the scientists and engineers. So we already clarified who's the Nuber and who's the Uber. I mean, come on now.
All right. So in all seriousness, there is a lot of renewed talk about the aged and what I would have said was defunct concept of security champion. I'd like if we could have a conversation surrounding that subject matter, how well it works, how well it doesn't work, maybe discuss a little bit of the history, but I want to get your take as to security champions and that whole championship concept, period. But before we do that, will you do me a favor and define a security champion?
You want my honest opinion or?
Yeah.
Defining a security champion is somebody you still don't know shit. You can't take somebody who's in development and make them a security champion who knows anything about security. That's a whole other topic in itself. Like, you can't take a security person who has no idea how to develop anything and turn them into a developer. I'm not saying that there's not possible, but you know how long it takes to even be good in security and how long it takes to actually be good at a developer. Yeah. So to me, the whole idea of security champion is hard to define because to me, it's just somebody that doesn't really know what they're doing. But the actual thought of it is supposed to be somebody that knows a little bit more about security than on their specific team that may know a little bit more about security than the group itself or the team, and can help that team progress and make sure they're implementing secure code practices. But that doesn't always turn out to be that way because they don't know what they're doing as well. Just because they may look online and say, hey, we're supposed to use this instead of that, doesn't mean that that's going to be the ideal method. So that's normally why you have a security team embedded in these different, working with these different teams or different groups. Yeah. So that's normally why you have a separate security team for that, because they are particularly, and they have that knowledge. They spent time, with perfecting their craft. So they've worked in their field. They understand, what's secure and what's not secure. They understand how to implement those practices. They understand that. People that are coming from different areas doesn't mean that they really understand how to secure things. And it's the same way with whether it's in system administration, network administration, development, doesn't matter. That's not their main focus. So I do not, in my opinion, I think that it's somebody that doesn't really know what they're doing and they're trying to, implement secure practices because they know a little bit about security. So that's my thought about it.
Have you ever seen a security champion program that was successful? And by successful, I mean long-term success and not just a single individual. We're talking about across an organization. And success would mean, I guess it can mean a lot of things. Let's just start open-ended, and we'll see where that goes.
No, I haven't heard any success. I've heard complaints. A lot of people who are the security champions are pressured. They're, one, pressured into it, and then two, they have to do double the job. So they have to not only do their job, they have to also be the champion for security, which they don't have time to do.
Right.
So it's a pressure thing, and that's all I ever heard was complaints about, why do I even have to do this? This is why do we have a security team if I have to be the security champion? And it's not a successful thing because you have too many people bickering about doing that, and then it still turns out, even when the product comes to the point where it's heading into production and it needs to have a pen test, where there's still complications, there's still insecurities there. So it's a false sense of security to me. So I have not seen in any organization where security champions actually were champions. Okay, you know, that's my experience with that. What about you?
I haven't either. So as far as I know, my best recollection is this having started somewhere around the early to mid 2000s, and it started within the government sector first, where it failed really quickly and they got rid of it. But, you know, corporations being corporations, for as much as they like to talk about private entities do it best, they always follow the government. They went through and started picking up this concept. And the reason why they did this, from my understanding, is really to reduce cost and because of course, the labor shortage. So they said, okay, well, we can do a security on the cheap. It's similar to, have you noticed how hospitals and clinics, oftentimes if you go in for a routine checkup, it's a registered nurse and not a doctor?
Yep.
It's the same exact thing and same reasoning. It's cheaper, labor shortage, but really it's cheaper. And you can work your nurses harder because, well, I mean, they are still under the guise that this is a privilege to have all of these patients and to be able to see them and do the checkup. It's a privilege. You know, they trust me so much. Security champions are in the same boat. What they don't realize in both cases is they're being used by the organization because the organization sees them as cheap resources that are significantly cheaper than the professionals. And that's what they do. Would you rather have a doctor examine you if you think you have a problem, or a registered nurse?
I would have a doctor, but
Same here.
In their case, you know, if they can get a nurse to do it cheaper than a doctor, and how much they paying the doctor to actually look at you, yeah, I get it. But then if a nurse gives me the wrong examination, then we have a problem.
Right.
You know, so why not get the professional who knows what they're doing to do that instead of getting somebody who don't know what to do?
Right.
Like I said, they didn't focus. That's not their focus.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And this isn't to slight nurses. I have a lot of nurses in my family.
No, not at all.
Nurses are fantastic.
We love you.
Yes.
Keep doing your job.
Yes, they're fantastic. I'll tell you what, if I were having a heart attack on the street, I would hope a nurse is there, not a surgeon. A lot of people don't know better, and they'd be like, I want the surgeon. You don't want the surgeon. Your nurse is going to know the latest CPR information. Your surgeon? No, not even remotely close. And the same is true even for a GP, a general practitioner, a standard doctor. Your nurse is still going to be better when it comes to that kind of first aid than a doctor will. Not to slight a doctor. One's a professional. I mean, your doctor is who you want to go to if you think you have a problem, if you might have a problem which you don't even know about, and if you want a real serious checkup. Nurses aren't trained for that, and I don't care what program you went through, they're not trained for that. Nurses are fantastic. They do a lot of things very well, and obviously when it comes to things like phlebotomy, nurses are a good nurse is hard to beat. Getting a vaccine, a good nurse can make it so you don't feel it and you're not sore. Bad nurses kind of punch it in, and then you're going to feel it for a long time. I say this as a guy who's taken a lot of vaccines thanks to the military. So
Man, you're a guinea pig.
Yes, that's true. That's actually literally true. They were using us to test vaccines. So anyway,
does that go along with the super? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out why are you not a super soldier now? You know what I'm saying? You should have that super soldier serum. Like,
seriously,
what the hell is going on, DaRon?
I don't know. I guess I missed a couple doses.
Could you imagine yourself being Captain DaRon?
That's
I mean, we
right.
can't say Captain. You know,
I want adamantium. That's what I really want. Wouldn't that be awesome? I mean, other than the excruciating pain for months, but
that would be really awesome. I mean, you couldn't be hurt at all. I mean, you're already a strong guy, so I mean, with that, you'd be 10 times stronger than that.
That'd be awesome.
20 times.
That's right. That's right. That would be awesome. It's just. So that's one of the big things is recognizing people's talent, people's skill set, and understanding that security champions don't make sense. Taking a developer, at least in the case of a nurse or a doctor, you're talking about people who are trained to do as medical professionals, but you can't then take that person to say, well, that person's going to be a surgeon today. I mean, doctor, yeah, they could hack it. It would probably be a bit of a messy job, shall we say, relative to a surgeon. They're not professional surgeons. And your developers, they don't even have any security training. There's not security training in computer science. And the stuff that you'll see is really bad. Your masters and everything else in security are all bunk. So these security champions don't have the knowledge, they don't have the skill set to begin with. Going through and saying, oh, well, they have a passion for it and they've learned some stuff off Google doesn't make any difference because, as you know, yeah, that's right. Our
Stack
field is too
Overflow.
big. Yeah, Stack Overflow. That's also where they learned how to program.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's like, would it be bad if I said maybe 99% of people? I'm always going back to that 1%, but I feel like in college, a lot of people literally utilized Stack Overflow. And it was so bad to a point where I remember trying to go in there to research or look at something, and it almost seemed like it shut down because so many people were going in there to look at stuff. And it's one thing to be able to utilize it for, to learn something new, but it's another thing to just copy and paste it. It doesn't even know what it does,
Well, we've seen that even in professional development teams, they'll resort to that, which always makes me so sad. I'm sorry, but if you're a professional development team and you're getting your answers from online like that, then I question whether you're in the right job. In fact, I don't question it. You're in the wrong job. So anyway, now I think one of the common issues beyond the fact that they don't have the knowledge or understanding, I mean, this is effectively like bestowing a white belt with this awesome power of life and death and saying, okay, well, you're a white belt now. You've shown that you're really interested in martial arts enough that you have gotten signed up, and we're going to turn you into a black belt. Well, that takes many years. You'll see schools that claim they'll do it in a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, and those schools are all baloney. But the same thing is true with security. Security is massive. This is such a massive field, utterly massive, that to say I could take someone whose day job is something else and make them a security wonk or even security dangerous is a ridiculous and honestly insulting statement. It would be like saying I could take a nurse and I could make them a surgeon without any training and while they're still doing nursing.
Are you mad that they said that they could take a certain person and they could become a hacker within a couple of months?
Okay.
Oh, man.
I actually had, we'll give a little backstory. I actually had a gentleman who, this is slightly different, who to my face sat there and he said he had years of development experience, so he should be able to understand and learn any security concept. And beyond the fact that he didn't have years of development experience, he probably didn't even have a year of actual development experience. It's ludicrous to say, since I understand developing, since I understand software development, I should be able to understand complex bytecode based deserialization attacks. I mean, that's ridiculous. And then he was saying the same thing about a slew of other complicated attacks. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. You don't have what it takes. And he was saying that he should be able to learn all of this stuff and be perfect within 6 months. I mean, we had the other gentleman who was saying the same thing.
Yeah, that person can do a padding oracle attack, like padding oracle attack. Yes.
So he claimed he had done that as well. And then when asked against what algorithm and what the key size was and what the IV was, because it was all this other stuff, he knew nothing. And anyone who's ever done this, and I have done this on a professional level, and I will tell you, if you ever do this in real life, you will remember those aren't even details. That is required to actually do it successfully. And yeah, I call it baloney.
That's another reason why. And he was supposed to be a security champion at one point. And that's another reason why you can't put a security champion in a security role.
Yes.
Especially if that's not their focus. That's not something they've been trained on and they've been doing for years. You can't take somebody off the street and make them to a hacker. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, it took years. I mean, you know it yourself. I'm sure that even though, you may be the God of all gods, I mean, you know that it took you time to really perfect your craft, and you just didn't wake up and be like, oh yeah, I can hack everything. Maybe you did. Who knows? You probably were when you came out, you probably were in your, your Pampers or whatever you wore, and just started hacking everything. It's like, this kid right here is something special.
Well, I'll tell you. So I think one of the important things is just like with martial arts. So martial arts, you don't just accept any student, right? I mean, you wouldn't take in a student who is a bit of a thug. When I say thug, I mean someone who's actively a thug, like shoots people kind of deal, gang war kind of thug, because they're going to then take that knowledge and they're going to do bad things with it, right? Temperament is important in martial arts. Temperament is important in security. I'm not going to take someone I don't trust and teach them how to sit there and compromise arbitrary systems. There's no good in that. And quite frankly, people like that shouldn't be in this field. And I'm not saying that we should be gatekeepers. I'm not a big fan of gatekeeping. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there are certain personalities that we should not encourage in this field because they're likely to take that knowledge and misuse it and do great harm, and potentially harm to your reputation, but certainly great harm to society in general. It was irresponsible for anyone to have put him on. He's got an ego problem, and you cannot have egoists in this field. Those are the kinds of people who run around compromising systems it's like ego lifting. It's the same exact thing.
I mean, well, there were several people like that on the team. So
unfortunately,
that shouldn't have been there. And it'd be saddening to see where they really go with this, because I do think that they're going to end up doing something that they shouldn't have done, but they shouldn't have been on there in the first place. But with that thought process and thinking that, hey, you can make anybody into a hacker within a couple of months, that's an insult to everybody. Anybody that you've been doing this for a while and, really, perfect and trying to perfect their craft, like that was an insult for me. Like, I'm like, what? You know, I've been doing this since I was little, and it took me years to even get to a point where I felt like I was pretty good. And even at the time, like we talked about, just because you get a black belt,
right,
doesn't mean that your journey stopped. It's just started. It's just beginning. You know, so the same way I see with hacking and, you know, elevating in your career from going from one, you know, to a junior to a associate, a senior, whatever. Like, I still feel those the same ideal, but you know, some people just want to have it. They want to be that guy now, and they don't want to go through the hurdles and obstacles to get to that point. And that's the key point. Going through those teaches you, you know, teaches you from learning from those mistakes, teaches you things, and teaches you how to solve a problem or go through that. That's the experience part. And without having that experience and going through those hurdles, how can you be good at something?
I agree, and that's one of the keys here is security champions. There are a lot of flaws with the concept. The first flaw being that you can take anyone. I mean, realistically, you shouldn't take just anyone. Just like not everyone is cut out to learn martial arts or be a doctor. I should not take just anyone and make them a doctor. Am I saying our field is as life-saving as doctors? Actually, I guess it is, depending on what you're talking about. Because we're not for people like me, then, I mean, well, let's just put it this way. Securing weapons platforms, you need someone who knows what they're doing, or there's a big problem. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. But yes, I mean, ultimately, I have to sit there and have someone who knows what they're doing. I have to have someone who I can guide, and it has to be something that they can put time into, and significant time. It's a daily journey, and it's something you do as a job. I can't take someone who doesn't know anything and in 3 years have them be this fantastic person. It would be a very rare person who could do that, who would be able to elevate within 3 years, because there's so much knowledge, so much breadth, so much scope. And then on top of that, the truth is security champions, I've never seen it where they actually had power. They don't ever have power. So what they're bargaining shit usually is their own goodwill and the goodwill that they have developed with their team, their rapport. That's not an effective way to secure something. Basically, to have your security champion begging everyone. And the same thing is true with the security team. If your security team doesn't have power, they fall into the same exact trap. If they can't make someone secure something, it's not going to work. And that's why management has to be on board with security. But regardless, security champions, I've never seen them have power. And nor should they, because they don't know enough. But I've also never seen it where a security champion who actually really enjoyed security stayed a security champion and didn't just join the security team. And to me, that's a failure of the program. So to me, when you have your security champions start transitioning over to the security team, that indicates a failure of the program. The other, and this occurs more often than that, is where your security champions were told that they were going to be security champions. They're not interested in it. They're not interested in the role. They don't get any more money. They don't get any more time. They have to do that on top of their job. They aren't learning what it is they're supposed to be learning because no one's teaching them. But even if someone were teaching them, it's not their job. They have another job. So I have not seen a successful security champion program anywhere. And I've seen a lot of places, big and small, government and corporate, try it. I wish this is something that would just die. It needs to die and never come back.
So I felt that, I remember us having that conversation about what would be the right way, since everybody believed that, security champions was the way to go. And it had failed like 2 or 3 times that they tried to implement that.
Yes.
So I remember us talking about the security liaisons and the ones that, taking people from the security team and actually putting them, especially on these projects, different projects, and working with the development team to make sure that they, and basically, you know, it should be secure by design. We should implement security from the beginning. So every time every new project that they would have, we would have somebody sit on and with that team and make sure that when they're going through the architect designs, threat modeling, and everything else, that they would be implementing in security by design and not at the end. So it'd be in the beginning and not at the end. And that would help us when we go through and do our penetration tests or code reviews. That would, you know, alleviate some of the issues they were having or some of the bugs that we were finding or vulnerabilities. So it would still probably be some in there, but it wouldn't be as many as we're finding, especially how we found on some of these other products where they were up into the 40s to 80s, you know, vulnerabilities. And that's, I'm not going to say that's unheard of, but you don't see a lot of, you know, penetration tests or risk assessments where there are like that many vulnerabilities. That's ridiculous.
Right.
And that means that we're not doing our job. So that would be a better implementation, because you have somebody being put in or, you know, being a part of a group or working with a group that actually knows what they're doing and actually has an understanding of how things should be done, and actually working a program, you know, so that everybody is following suit, basically. Everybody's following the same, you know, objective. So that would be a lot better than Security Champions, because now you have somebody who actually is focused. Their focus is security. It's not security and development or development and security. That's their main focus. And then everybody else feel comfortable doing their job and not feel uncomfortable with that, having the pressure of being the security person and the developer. So especially having that as a security professional, you know, ourselves, we have a lot of pressure. We're always, you know, the pressure's always on, the spotlight's always on, even though you don't like spotlight, but it's always on us because you can't, in a way, you can't be wrong.
Right.
You have to be right. You know, you have to know what you're doing. So in that case, the developer who's now the security champion is wrong in any sort, then that puts a lot on them and on the company and on the team. And then the team doesn't really want to follow them anymore because now they got, you know, a lot of backlash from it. So it's a lot of pressure. And being a developer and a security, you know, person, that's a lot to do. And I know, you know, because, you know, you do all roles, but I'm just saying in particular for somebody who's not a security professional, it's a lot to deal with. So the security liaison, like, idea is a lot better to implement in different companies. If they want to implement something like a security champion, take your security team and take people from that security team and put them in on these different projects and let them work in and make sure that everything is baked in before, you know, it gets pushed out to production. And that way it makes it a lot easier to secure your product before, you know, you give it or run it through a penetration test or a risk assessment.
That's exactly right. It also has the added benefit for those organizations, and I'm not a fan of this, but there are a lot of organizations that have been pushing this direction for a very long time because they started it with the IT groups and have moved out since then to doing security as a service. I do not like that. But the benefit here is by using security liaisons, you have those security professionals that are embedded in these different projects or programs, and now they can timeshare. So now they're billing, for all intents and purposes, to the teams they're embedded with. That means now your security team can grow appropriately and can scale as need be to match what it is that you actually need. So a lot of benefits here because you have your experts, and that's key here, experts embedded with these development or engineering or administrative teams, and they're really ensuring that all the proper protocols, procedures, etc. are being followed. But they're also going through and doing a lot of preventative measures, and they have the trust because the team trusts them as the experts. Your security champions aren't experts, and every team knows those people aren't experts. They know Johnny or Sally or whomever was just appointed or anointed as a security champion, that person doesn't really know much more than them, more likely than not, and that person is easily blown off. And that's what happens over and over and over again. The security champion concept is itself a flawed one. It was flawed from the get-go. But security liaisons, I have implemented in multiple places incredibly effectively. It's been very successful. And I wish more organizations chose that model. I hope they don't move toward the security as a service model. I don't like that, and I don't like that for a lot of reasons, to include conflict of interest, to me, are immense when you do that kind of thing, because now there's pressure. So if you're my customer, and I give you a report you don't like, well, you're not going to have me do it again. And this is in the real world, right? So you do consulting, right? And you work for a company that is a third party. I do that too. And there is always the risk that you give a report that the customer doesn't like, and so they drop you. You're gone.
Yeah.
And you have the same thing.
That's the pressure you have to deal with. That's why it's not good to have that, especially internally, security as a service. It doesn't make sense to even do that. And as you know, when we were coming from Ireland, we worked with the product owners, and the way it seemed was that they were clients. And it almost felt like we were having security as a service, but it was a lot different, because it didn't matter whatever report, whether they liked it or not, something they needed to follow, because the evidence was there. But whether you have the evidence or you have enough findings or anything, when you're doing security as a service, clients can find little bitty things that may be an issue to them, and then drop because they don't like that. Whether you get a great service or not, they don't care.
Right.
And that's a lot of immense pressure that, you don't want to get into, especially an internal, security team.
I completely agree. All right.
Yeah.
That's our episode for the day. I hope you all enjoyed it. We, if you couldn't tell, are very much against the concept of security champions. I've never seen that work. Ron,
I've never seen it work.
Yeah.
If you want to implement a program like that, implement what we were just saying, a security liaisons, where it's actually somebody from your security team, and put them on the projects with the development team. For whatever project you're going to actually do that needs to be pushed out a certain deadline, and make sure the security is put first. It starts from the beginning and not just at the end.
That's exactly right.
You want to make sure that is done. It will make it a lot smoother for you guys to catch the vulnerabilities before you put them in production, and that way you won't have issues.
That's exactly right.
So that's a lot better and a better implementation than the security that we recommend.
Definitely. Well, if you liked this content, please like the video and feel free to subscribe. We would absolutely love to have more people who are really adamant about some of these same topics we are, chiming in, talking to us. You can sit there and comment. We will respond. You can message us. We will respond. You can email us. We will respond.
Yeah, and if you have any other topics that you recommend or want us to talk about, please feel free to actually post that down in the comment section, and we'll take a look at it, and we might actually talk about that as a topic in our next episode. So yeah, please subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. And I am Roniel.
I am DaRon.
And this is the Roniel and DaRon podcast show. To the next time.
Have fun.